everyone. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for joining us again this week for episode 60 of the Horse Racing Show. And I hope everyone's staying safe out there, keeping the distance, washing the hands, all the things that we're supposed to do right now. And the hope is that everybody will get healthy and we'll get back to normal business, because it's a different world for everyone, including in horse racing. And we're going to talk about that today, adjustments that are having to be made. Probably the best thing out of all this is there's no right or wrong when you're dealing with business right now. I'm sure that we're going to get this could work, this might work, this is what we're thinking about. Marc Guilfoil, who is Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, will join us. There is no state that probably loves the horse and deals with horse racing more than the state of Kentucky. It means so much, not just to the racing business itself, but all the ones from landscaping to fence makers that are associated with it, to feed companies, et cetera, et cetera. And it's that way in several states, obviously, where horse racing is important. And then Brad Cox will join us. He remains one of the hottest trainers out there. We had him on our very first show. He's coming off a big win in the Louisiana Derby. Wells Bayou was the winner there. Naturally, if in a perfect world, and we were getting ready for the first Saturday in May, as we usually are, always are at this time, we'd be talking about what that big victory meant and how he was pointing him and getting him ready in probably what would have been his last race for the Derby. Now, what do you do 4 months getting ready for that Derby in September? We'll talk to Brad and get his thoughts in there. With us, as always, Ben Chaffins is in there on lead guitar this week. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Kenny.
And Mr. Thomas Kenny, looking dapper today, sitting here. Our top researcher with his new outfit on, looks like.
Is a new shirt, yeah.
Look at that. See, it's good. Do something new out there. Try to keep it fresh. Try to, invigorate yourself as much as possible. I say that for my own benefit as much as yours. So I'm watching a sportscast the other night, a local sportscast, and I was, paying attention a little bit, kind of reading and then I heard him voicing over a basketball game, as if the basketball game were happening. And I looked up, and it was an NCAA tournament game that's being played now, but it's been set up by these guys who do the virtual reality stuff. And they have done their own brackets, and they've set up their own tournament, and they were playing their own game. And then you look up and see that I guess everybody out there would be like the avatar or something for them. They would be playing this game. It was Louisville playing Vermont, if you can imagine that matchup. So I thought, what if we had a virtual Kentucky Derby? What if everything was in place and we were going to run the Derby the first Saturday in May? Thomas, how would that lineup look? Pretty much sure that these horses would definitely be in the field, and there's probably 7 or 8 others that we could debate on.
Well, like you said, it's all speculation, even up to almost even the morning line odds. You never know if someone's going to get scratched or whatnot. But as far as right now, Derby contenders, you've got Authentic, you've got Till the Law, Ite Indian, Independence Hall, Nadal, Sol Volante, Charlatan, Wells Bayou, Honor AP, Governor Morris, and King Guillermo.
That would be a good field right now. That would be a good field. Remember those names, file them away, as I'm sure horse racing fans are, and it will be very curious to see who is still around come the first Saturday in September, as it's going to be now for the Kentucky Derby.
It feels so strange to say that, but it's really the best thing for the sport, for the people involved. I don't really see a way around it.
I can commend the people at Churchill Downs and the way they made it happen. And it looks like, with all said and done, that the Derby will be run on the first Saturday in September, when you realize that the Olympics had just been postponed. Obviously, the Masters canceled, March Madness canceled, things that just aren't happening this year in sports. That has been the one bright spot, the one hope, and hope is a big word at this stage in the game for all of us, is that there will be a Kentucky Derby this year. At least we sure hope so. If this is still the case in September, it will be like Night of the Living Dead.
And they still plan to have the other 2 Triple Crown races immediately afterwards. Isn't that right?
Well, that's the plan right now, although Belmont is still holding out at this time, and that could change, that they're hoping that the first Saturday in June, they will still have the Belmont Stakes. It looks like the Preakness is going to follow suit and come a couple of weeks after the Kentucky Derby in September. That, again, the Belmont could be run the first part of October, which would still give it a month out before the Breeders' Cup at Keeneland in November, 6 and 7. I mean, that's a possibility. And again, it's a very fluid situation right now. Belmont might have theirs. So we may have a Triple Crown. And remember, the Triple Crown, as we know it now, has never been set in stone since day one. It's come about in the last several decades, 70, 80 years like this, where it's the Kentucky Derby, the Preakness, and the Belmont. But it's not a rule that it has to be that way. So hypothetically, the Derby could be the second jewel of the Triple Crown this year if the Belmont goes off in June. And of course, a lot will be decided in the next month how everything's working out with the situation that we're in. Marc Guilfoil is having to make some tough decisions. Everyone is at the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. He joins us next when we come back, and then later on, Brad Cox, only here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning again this week, and one of the radio stations that carry us, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or you're watching this on YouTube. We appreciate the support in episode number 60 of the Horse Racing Show. And we have a new sponsor, a guy that I've known for a long time, Terry Finley of West Point Thoroughbreds. You know, it's one thing to be in business. It's another thing to have passion about that business, and he does both. When I met Terry, he had one horse in his stable. He now has over 875 wins, over $53 million in purses. If you're interested in the horse racing business, I recommend that you get in touch with the good folks at West Point Thoroughbreds. That's 518-583-6638 or westpointtb.com. I know these are tough times for everyone. People are thinking about financial decisions, but give them a call. You might be surprised at some of the packages that they offer where you can become a horse owner with limited risk. You'll be part of a partnership, and they're one of the groundbreakers in this. It's been going on for 3 decades, with much success, including Always Dreaming. They were minority owner of that Derby winner. That is West Point Thoroughbreds. As we talked about at the start of this show, there are no right or wrong answers at this stage, pretty much with everything going, including the horse racing industry. Everyone's doing the best they can, and we commend the Churchill Downs folks and the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission with everything being canceled or postponed indefinitely. We know that the Kentucky Derby is going to be the first Saturday in September. With me now is a man that I've known for many years. He is well respected, not just in the state of Kentucky, but throughout the horse racing world. Marc Guilfoil, the executive director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. Marc, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, you're welcome. Anytime, Kenny, anytime.
And, you know, as I said, I don't know if there's a right or wrong answers. I know you've had a lot of questions thrown at you, and the whole commission has, probably starting with the Derby being moved. Was that an easy decision when Churchill Downs talks to you and said, we got to have this racing date the first Saturday this time around in September?
Yeah, it was an easy decision, but a decision of great magnitude. But when Churchill called us and said, we're going to have to postpone this, we want to move it. We basically just said, we'll open the calendar up. You guys tell us where you want to put it, and we'll make it work here. We'll make it work through government. We'll get all the other racetracks, everybody in line, so we can have that very important day, the most important day that in the state of Kentucky. And September the 5th was the date. It was sort of a little bit on the funny side that you realize how much pull that Notre Dame football had. They had a little bit to do with it. So outside of moving some race dates around, they had to do it on the football schedule and whatnot. But we got it. At least we got a target to shoot for. The first Saturday, I guess we would say, in September. So it was a lot of people coming together at the right time, and the horse business doing what we had to do to get things done.
Marc, how does the Kentucky Commission work with, say, Maryland, work with New York, with commissions everywhere? But I mentioned those 2 states specifically as we're still trying to figure out if we will have an order of the Triple Crown like people for decades have been accustomed to with Derby, Preakness, Belmont, because some of that is still up in the air, particularly the Belmont that still may try to get that date in June the 6th that they want.
Yeah, we work with other jurisdictions, work with all 38 of them but that's more on the tracks, the Churchill Downs, getting together with the Triple Crown Series and figuring out where that all work. And then obviously Maryland and New York will have to work out their schedule with their horsemen and their other associations. We do work with other jurisdictions, but it's more on regulation of medications and whatnot. The part about where to schedule the other 2 of the Triple Crown, that would pretty much goes to those states and how they work with their legislature and their governor and their other racing associations in that state.
As I said earlier, there's no easy decisions to make right now. It's hard to say what is right or what is wrong at this time. I really don't think you can. You just do what you feel is best. And one of those decisions, and it was a big one, is that Keeneland canceled their spring meet, which meant that one of the big horse races, which is usually a Derby prep race, the Bluegrass Stakes, will not be run this year. When Keeneland came to you, was there a lot of discussion about trying to keep it going, or was it pretty much a cut and dried issue, Mark, that in all best interest, maybe take a break and resume racing in October, we all hope?
Yeah, it is a cut and dry, but it's not a cut and dry in the aspect that the Keeneland, we as in the horse racing industry are taking our lead off the CDC and off the governor of this state, who's who's very, in tune to horse racing, as you know, and has been a very good friend to horse racing throughout the year, along with his father and his mom. And but Keeneland was, talking to the CDC, talking to government, talking to the federal government, and when they decided that they needed to cancel the meet, obviously they came to us and we're okay with that. What we're going to try to do is our dates committee. We're going to get those people together. That's probably about 7-8 commissioners next week, along with all the presidents of the racetrack, and we're going to talk about whenever we come out of this. We see light at the end of the tunnel. We just hope it's not a train. We want the light on the other side. And when we do come out of this, we want to, see what we can do as far as, for lack of a better word, rearranging the race schedule in Kentucky. So if we come out of this in June or July, then hopefully we can just say, okay, this is what starts our race calendar now. And then we'll try to be creative along with the racetracks, along with government, and on how to get these racetracks going and try to make up as many of these race dates as we can make up. We're a livestock business. We're an agriculture business. You can't just shut the doors and shut things off. We got living beings on the racetrack or at training centers that need to be taken care of. So what we're going to try to do is get everybody together. We might have to double up on dates. Where one racetrack races the same day another racetrack races, and come up and be very creative and come up with another set of race officials. But everything's open. Like you said to start the show, there's no wrong decision to make right now. We're trying to do the best we can. If you think about the horse racing business, trainers, everybody's got to have a target to shoot at. Everybody's used to having a target to shoot at, whether it be the Bluegrass Stakes, the horse they train, their whole year with a horse up for that race. Well, right now we don't have a target, and that's what's the most difficult thing for me and some of the trainers I've talked to. I talked to David Angordo this morning down in Florida, and he was asking questions, and I can't give him answers now because I don't know. And I understand their angst. I understand everybody's angst. We just don't have a target to shoot at. Now, as soon as we get together and we figure that target out, that target might move, but at least we can put a target of June 1st, July 1st, whatever the feds tell us, the CDC, and say when this is going to run its course or when they think it's going to run its course. We'll get a target date to shoot at, and then we'll start trying to rearrange things to make things fit. Is it going to be perfect? No, it's not going to be perfect. There's race dates that we missed, but we're going to try to make up as much as possible because the purse money that's out there does no good unless it's in the horseman's hands, and we got to find a creative way to get it in the horseman's hands.
Marc Guilfoil, Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, one of the leading commissions around, not being biased because I'm a Kentuckian and we do this show out of Kentucky, but it means so much to this state with the biggest race in the world, the Kentucky Derby. You'll know about that. People ask me when I travel. They know I'm from Kentucky if I've ever been to the Derby. But also, as you talk about, Mark, the agricultural side of it, because the workers have to be there. This is much like you can't leave your kids unattended right now. Kids are staying home from school. Horses are still going to be in those barns, whether they're working or not. How does Steps go about trying to protect these people that are working around the track and making sure that, number one, they can still be working around the track and they still have jobs? I guess that's first, and then the safety of which it's not been proven at all that the virus ever goes through an animal anyway.
Right, and that's a very good point. You think about trainers probably on the average, or I'd say your average trainer probably has 20 to 30 employees, and they're each their own little business. Again, we're taking measures that the CDC hands down. I don't know if you've tuned into our Governor Beshear in the state of Kentucky. He gives an update every afternoon at 5 o'clock. It's great. It gives people a little bit of comfort. He lets them know what's going on, where they think they're at there, and gives an update. But going back to the trainers, they'll have like 30 employees in the barn, and I've talked to several this morning, talked to several throughout the last week or so, and they are taking steps. There's a lot of them that have the thermal thermometers, you hold them up, and they're taking temperatures of all their employees. If somebody has a cough, they're telling them to go home. Of the 30 employees, and I think it was at Belmont the other day, they had a backside worker I think was confirmed with the coronavirus, and we got to keep that away from the racetracks. It's a huge learning curve for us right now. We're not used to it on the human side, although we're used to it if you think about it on the equine side. In the spring of the year when we have an outbreak of whatever it is, even going back in the 80s when we had was it equine viral arteritis, EVA
right.
outbreak with the stallions and whatnot. So we as in the horse industry do know how serious disease and disease control is. So a lot of these trainers are, sort of extrapolating that into what they've been seeing, what they have been doing along with horses and the diseases we get in the spring, and doing that with their employees, taking the temperatures, the coughs. There's a lot. They're taking it very serious. It would be hard to believe that somebody's not. Everybody I've talked to, they're calling us, asking us for guidance. I tell them that they need to call the medical experts. I'm not going to try to give an answer on that because you can't guess on this stuff. When you want a bridge built, you call a bridge builder, and I tell them they need to go to the medical people. Churchill Downs, I know Keeneland, all the racetracks have been at phone's length with all these associations or these entities, finding out best practices on what they can do to contain this, what they can do to keep it out of their barn area. There's Turfway Park, I think, probably has couple 300 horses on the grounds right now. The Thoroughbred Training Center over here has probably got 500. Keeneland's probably got 300 on grounds. Obviously, with horses, there's grooms, there's employees. So they're trying to do best practices on the fly and to contain this.
We're talking with Marc Guilfoil, Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. Great insight. We're going to talk more with Marc when we come back in just a moment right here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show and our new sponsor, West Point Thoroughbreds. You're interested in the thoroughbred industry. You want to get involved in the fun and excitement of owning a horse. You're worried a little bit about the risk. Well, that risk is reduced when you're in a partnership, and there's none better than getting in with Terry Finley and the folks at West Point Thoroughbreds. Check them out online at westpointtb.com or call them at 518-583-6638. All they do is go out there and win, and they're always looking for that horse, like they did with Always Dreaming. They became a minority interest owner in him, and, of course, he went on to win the Kentucky Derby. They've had success all over the nation. So if you're looking to get into the business, this might be a good time right now. Check out Terry Finley and West Point Thoroughbreds. We're talking with Marc Guilfoil, Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. I've known Marc a long time. We go back, I think we first met, Marc, when you were in the harness racing side of racing, and I was doing the Breeders' Crown Harness Race Series back in the 80s, somewhere around that time.
That's correct. I remember us back from the old Red Mile days, back in the late 80s. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, those were some kind of days, too. I don't know, it's kind of gone now in Kentucky, but how powerful the harness race business was at one time in the state with the Red Mile and Castleton Farm and many others around here.
Yeah, it has. There's a resurgence coming along, though, with the historical horse racing that we have in Kentucky, that the purses are going to be there where we can compete. I've always said is we don't need to blow other jurisdictions out of the water on purses. All we need to do is get equal to them because we have the infrastructure in Kentucky we have the best of everything, the best vets, the best feed companies, the best fencing companies. I'm a little biased, but I do think probably within 30, 45 miles of where I'm sitting at right now, we have the best of everything there is to offer in equine.
And, of course, a great pride in this state. I said what a positive it was that the Derby's still going on. When you hear things that are canceled or maybe postponed indefinitely and you wonder if it ever will really come about, to have a firm stance that it's going to be now the first Saturday in September with the Derby, I thought it was just a huge plus, not just for horse racing fans, but for sports fans to have some hope and something to mark on the calendar to look forward to.
I totally agree. Everything in life's got to have an anchor point. And the way I look at our business right now, the Kentucky Derby in Kentucky is our anchor point, and having it the first Saturday in September, at least everybody's got that target. So we know that's that's the end game, and we can build around that. Communication is a key. We make sure that everybody, I've been on the phone for the last week and a half with a lot of friends that are trainers that are down in Florida, that are in Arkansas, and everybody's, they got questions. Everybody's wanting to know. We don't have a whole lot of answers right now. We're trying to get to that point. We're sort of harnessed in government right now because we can't have in-face meetings. They've got to be video conferences and all that. So we're getting all that set up. And the next week, as I said earlier, the Race Dates Committee is going to get together along with all, Ron Winchell and Kevin Flannery and Jeff Hall and Bill Tomlinson and Vince Gabbard and Joe Costa at the Red Mile. And we're going to start the conversation on, where we're going to go moving forward. We want to hear at the Racing Commission what Keeneland's got in mind, what Churchill's got in mind, what Ellis Park, what the Red Mile, Kentucky Downs, so we can at least get the conversation going. So when we do have light at the end of the tunnel, we're ready to roll.
Marc, is there any word right now in Churchill Downs as far as what they are hoping, and hope's a big word for everybody in every walk of life right now with what all is going on, but is there still hope that they'll be able to have that spring going into summer meet coming up in the next few weeks? We obviously know that the Derby's been moved back, so that first part of May seems to be off the calendar, but I don't know if there's still hope and plans to pick something up in mid-May and take it through June into July.
We haven't got into that conversation yet. The hope is that the world can get this disease contained and let it run its 2 courses or 1 course, or whatever it needs to run, so we can just see where we're at right now. And obviously, these racetracks, they're ready to roll too. They want to put on the show. They know that we have to have live racing in order to generate handle, and it's the trickle down on that. So they haven't come out and said yet. But, again, we're still watching. It's always, I tell people, especially if they're in the state of Kentucky or they're out of the state of Kentucky, our Governor Beshear is doing a phenomenal job of updating people. And I encourage everybody, I think it's on a Facebook Live, or you can get it on a lot of TV stations through Twitter, through Facebook, and tune into that at 5 o'clock and listen to what he's got to say. Because we're taking his lead and disseminating what we can do, what we can't do, and then we're going to meet with the members that I told you, and we're going to get the ball rolling, at least get the conversation started, because this is all about communication. It really is. Everybody, the right hand needs to know what the left hand's doing, and it's sort of difficult right now. Again, this is new to us. It's new to you. It's new to everybody. We don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I just hope we don't have another day like I think it was last week from Wednesday to Thursday, just how everything accelerated in the world. On this, it was just a horrible day. It was a reality. It's reality out there, and I just hope we don't have another day like that. But we got to figure out. We got to have a target. That's what I say. We're a livestock business. We're an agriculture business. You can't just shut the doors. These horses, you were mentioning about leaving kids unattended. The one thing about it, at least kids can talk. These horses can't talk.
Yeah.
So they're at our beck and call to take care of them. And like I've always said, if you put the horse first in any decision you're making in this business, you're making the right decision. So we gotta put the horse first.
A plus side for horse racing, they're the only game in town right now. Vegas, before they closed down, they were taking Russian hockey bets. They couldn't figure out, they were taking Russian hockey and some obscure soccer matches that were still little places. I don't know people knew who was even playing, but the gambler wants to look for something. But racing is the only sport right now you can bet on in the U.S., and Turfway's done a good job without fans there of continuing their meet at least, and I thought that was pretty impressive.
Very much so. I'm just about watched all this surfing that I want to watch on TV when I was on Sunday. I turned on, I don't know, it might have been the Wild World of Sports from the 70s or something. I forgot what it was, but I'm a little bit, I keep it on TVG and all the racing channels, to get my fix of horse racing.
And if horse racing, it was kind of natural for you, wasn't it? Your dad's a vet as you grew up in Glasgow, Kentucky. And like I said, when I met you, you were at the harness racing business. You've been director of racing, and you've been the deputy executive director, now the executive director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. It seems like a natural progression for you, and you've done a great job.
Yeah, I've had horses and livestock in my life since I was old enough to remember, and it has been. I grew up with quarter horses. That's I was barrels and poles and rodeo, and when I came to college and I started working on the regulatory side of it, again, I'm a big bleeding heart. I want to be the voice for the horse. You're not going to get rich being a race official, but you are rich, and as far as you're doing very good things for animals. And we have a lot of good people in this business. I've talked to a lot of trainers that they're calling in just wanting to know trying to figure out what's going on. So and I had a horseman tell me this morning. He said, Mark, we're willing to help. We're here to help. And he even said that I've got some people. If you have to double up on race officials on an emergency situation, we can go to the stand. He goes, we'll work for free. And I'm like, well, if we're going to put you in the stand, we're going to pay you.
Yeah.
But the horsemen, we're all coming together as I expected. This business is. We're tight knit. We're our own little world, and it's really good when the horsemen call trainers, big time trainers call and say, hey, we're willing to help. Tell us what we can do. And we appreciate that.
See, I would recommend now, because everybody's been inundating Marc with calls for weeks, just tell them to click on the link this week when we go up on YouTube or one of the radio stations or iHeartRadio, okay? You just explained everything. They can listen to these 2 segments and they'll know.
There you go.
Marc, I really appreciate your time. I know how valuable it is, and continued success. I think the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission, not just biasly living here in the state, is doing a great job in what is, again, very uncertain times. So thanks again, Marc.
No, and we appreciate you, Kenny. It's communications, getting the word out. People can listen and they can pick up some information and whatnot. So everybody, we all can push and pull in the same direction.
Marc Guilfoil, Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. Stay with us. Up next on the Horse Racing Show, trainer Brad Cox coming off a big win in the Louisiana Derby. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for downloading us. We've been downloaded in 22 countries over these 60 episodes that we've done. The man that was on the very first one when we got all this started, January 2019, is a friend of mine. I had the pleasure of meeting him through some mutual friends. I think at dinner at Saratoga, I believe, is where I first met Brad Cox. And he was a hot young trainer then, and now he's already established. He was a finalist for Eclipse Award as Trainer of the Year last year. He had the speedster Kofefi, who won a couple of Eclipse Awards, a Monomoy girl before that. He is just coming off his 3rd straight title down at the fairgrounds in New Orleans. He won the Louisiana Derby with Wells Bayou. Here he is, Brad Cox. Brad, welcome back.
Good morning, Kenny, and thanks for having me on.
I said you're part Cajun now, aren't you? I mean, you go to Louisiana and you just keep winning these titles down there.
Yeah, no, it's been a good place to us. It's a great place to winter. Horses seem to, do well there and then come out of there and, take their show on the road, bring it to Kentucky and New York and do well. So it's been very good to us the last 5-6 years.
And now you're back home in Kentucky and I guess trying to figure out what to do with Wells Bayou. Congratulations on that Louisiana Derby win.
Thank you. Yeah, and like you said, it's just kind of a lot of things up in the air right now with just everything, but obviously racing as well. It's just a little definitely a setback, and just a little unsure as to how things are gonna unfold over the next few months.
I'm sure that everyone who comes off what would have been a Derby prep race, a major one like the Louisiana Derby, and win it as you did with Wells Bayou, the owners would be excited about, okay, we're going to give him all the time off now to the Derby. How's the training going to be? But in this uncertain time where I don't think there's right and wrong answers, I don't know what any trainer does as far as pointing to the next race, thinking hopefully that everybody will still be around in September to run.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I think right now, really the only option we would have currently would be the Arkansas Derby, which, I think it's now May 2nd. That's a possibility for him. But, I'm hoping over the next few weeks they're going to come up with some type of schedule. I mean, they've announced that obviously the Derby's September 5th, and that's our main goal. But, how we get there is just right now still is an unknown. Yeah,
they said, it could be like the Haskell and suddenly the Travers become big Derby prep races.
Yeah, for sure. There's no doubt about it. So, we just have to see. And I'm sure Churchill will probably offer some type of prep race as well. It's possible, so who knows? It gives us an opportunity to get a race over the tracks if he likes it. He's had one race, Wells Bayou, being there at Churchill in the mud around one turn. But, it's one of those things where, just a lot of unknown right now.
And as far as your crew, everybody being able to keep their jobs and keep employed, I know you have to have all your workers around the barns and taking care of the horses. No matter what else is happening, the horse is still there in the barn every day.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, nothing really changes other than, we're just not entering, as many tracks running, not as much entering and running as going on. But, everybody's responded well to help. The owners obviously, are content right now to, just let's march forward, continue to do what we do, train. I mean, from a trainer standpoint, we're probably not training quite as much, maybe not breezing, say, weekly, but, it's business as usual at the barns of the morning.
And so your day is now gone from Louisiana back to Kentucky to settle in and start marking through plans and writing out new plans, probably like every trainer is doing that had a Derby hopeful, I imagine, Brad.
Yeah, for sure. You just, like you said, you just kind of, they just kind of have to call some audibles and change some things up. And, it is what it is. But the main thing, the horses are happy and healthy and, continuing to train well.
Talking with Brad Cox, who just won the Louisiana Derby with Wells Bayou. What has been impressive about him? As you mentioned, he was at Churchill in the mud, went around one turn, and then looked so good down in Louisiana over the weekend.
Yeah, he's really just gotten better. And we always thought he was a horse would get better with age and time. And we bought him out of a 2-year-old sale last year in March. And, we thought, he was a horse that looked like he would get 2 turns. And Lance Gasway was the owner. He and his father Clint were very patient and allowed us to actually backed off of him last summer, give him a break, and he responded well. And he's, like I said, always been a horse we thought would be, better around 2 turns, and he's proved that. And he has speed. He has speed, and he can carry it 2 turns. So he's a very get a lot done in the afternoons for sure.
With the way things have gone and certain horses that may have been sidelined with injuries or, a little hiccup in the training and maybe didn't get a race in that they were planning on if everything had gone as was scheduled and the Derby was the first Saturday in May. Some horses may get a real break from this and be ready again in September. And you might have one of those.
Yeah, Mr. Monomoy. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's a horse that obviously, if the Derby was on schedule the 1st of May, he had no shot of making it. But now with it being pushed back, there's definitely the possibility that he could make it. One of these prep races, or if he could, show up for one of those and be competitive and maybe pick up some points. And he was doing well. It'd definitely be something we would, point for with him. So it's not a bad thing. It's been moved for all horses. I know there's several other horses that's going to benefit from the race being pushed back as well.
Yeah, Maxfield is one of those that come to mind, by the way.
Right.
Right. How is Mr. Monomoy right now?
He's doing really well. He's recovering right now in Star Farm, just getting some, just being freshened up, and we're expecting he's expected to go back into light training in about 30 days. So he's moving along at a good pace, and like I said, I think it's very possible that he as long as he comes back in good order and no setbacks, he could very easily, hopefully, at one race and maybe look at the Derby. We'll see what happens.
As far as yourself, and I'm really happy for your success, getting to know you over these years, and even saw you at a football game last year up there in the Marc Stoops box at University of Kentucky. Did you ever sit back and go, wow, this is really something, all these things? I mean, I don't want to say overnight sensation, but a lot of great things have happened, as should, with a great trainer like you are.
Well, I watched some of the replays of the Breeders' Cup victories and obviously Monomoy Girl and some of the great ones that we've been able to pick up over the last few years. And I mean, it's great to look back on that. But honestly, I mean, I'm a very driven person and always, trying to do a little better. And I guess, now I don't know. I mean, I'm proud of what we've accomplished, but definitely, I feel like there's a lot more out there to do. So, I mean, it's, get up every day and do it and enjoy it. That's the one thing. I mean, there's, bumps along the way and things that, some frustrating things that go on with within the business. But at the end of the day, I mean, I really do love what I do and I enjoy it. So, and I feel like there's so much more out there to accomplish. And, like this time of year is exciting with getting young horses in and just the prospect of, or just kind of dreaming about what they could be. So it's something where you can't really rest on what you've accomplished. You just got to keep marching forward. And it's an exciting game for sure.
And it's been an exciting time for Brad Cox, a trainer who just won the Louisiana Derby with Wells Bayou, as he mentioned, Covfefe and Monomoy Girl among the outstanding horses as he's had. And we'll talk more with Brad when we come right back here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Kenny Rice here. Glad that you're with us. Glad to have my friend Brad Cox with us again. He is coming off a big win in the Louisiana Derby with Wells Bayou. Hey, do you ever call like Bob Baffert and Todd Pletcher and I guess Barkley Tagg over there and maybe Patrick Biancone and say, let's have a virtual Derby? let's line them up. We'll get a computer guy to set it up and we'll see if tis the law and authentic and Governor Morris can beat my horse. I don't know.
Yeah, no, that would be neat. That'd be neat.
Has any of the trainers talked to you? You guys just kind of exchange ideas because, like we say, it's just new territory. I don't think there's a right and wrong answer at this stage. Just
Right.
New territory.
Yeah, now someone asked me the other day about it. Obviously, I've never run a horse in the Derby, but I think this makes it maybe a touch more difficult as far as trying to get a horse to peak in September as opposed to May when you're, running in these prep races where, when you're running in them, you got to be competitive and you got to tighten the screws on your horses because they're very tough races. And people are bringing fit horses into them. So, to try to keep a horse in form until September, it's tough, and it takes a very special horse to be able to take that amount of training and racing throughout the year. And it all goes back to just kind of really just anticipating what's going to happen with the races and the point system moving forward. And it's going to be challenging to say the least.
Yeah, that's a great point because, as you know, as every trainer out there pointing toward the Derby, if everything in a perfect world, it was still the first Saturday in May. Just the fact you won the Louisiana Derby is no guarantee that you're going to be ready the first Saturday in May, much less talking about what's going on 4 months from now.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. So, it's going to make for a long year for these 3-year-olds. And, I think you're going to have to, with a horse like Wells Bayou that you would assume with the 104 points he has would get in, you got to somehow figure out how to get him to September to be the best September 5th that he can be. And just kind of thinking out loud. The horse has already had three big efforts this year. We can't continue. I wouldn't think that this is something we're going to have to be able to continue to do every 4 or 5 weeks. We really just need to work back from September and just like once again, just kind of anxious to see what kind of races we're going to have to run in over the next 3 or 4 months.
It would be like old time days, won't it? You can have a horse coming into the Derby like 5 or 6 starts as a 3-year-old.
Yeah,
somebody
for
might,
sure. Yeah, no, it's interesting you said that. I look back at Spectacular Bids for him the other day, and I wasn't around when he was running or started, and he was a very tough horse. They run him every 2 weeks. I think like the Fountain Youth Florida Derby. I think maybe we made a start at Hialeah, then the Bluegrass. Back then, I think the Bluegrass was like 10 days or 2 weeks before.
Yeah, it was. I remember going to the Bluegrass in college, and it was like 9 days out from the Derby or something.
Yeah, exactly. So, you just don't see that anymore with these horses for whatever reason. But, it's just, just try to give them time between, and it seems to work out well now. But it's definitely different than it was 30, 40 years ago, and it's going to be different this year than any other.
Yeah, who knows? And again, who knows who even will be there? That's the thing. No matter how good they are now, who knows who's going to be around in September?
Right, exactly.
I guess for not just for you, but for everybody that has an owner out there, you talk about the patience and not getting too excited about the Derby. Don't get that Derby fever too early. Probably more so this year than ever before. You have to all trainers have to reinforce that, don't they, with their clients? Is keep that Derby fever a little bit on the simmer right now. Let's not turn the heat up too much till September comes around.
Right. Yeah. That, and I think a lot of it too is just how you get there. Once again, like you got a horse that just won $1 million race, and it's kind of like the Arkansas Derby's. It's a nice purse. The timing, as long as he's doing well, the timing would be fine. I think it would be back in like maybe right at 6 weeks. But at the end of the day, it all goes back to trying to get him to September and peak. So, we'll just kind of see how things play out over the next few months.
Brad Cox is with us, outstanding young trainer, just keeps getting better, keeps turning in big wins like his recent one, the Louisiana Derby. And Brad, just a hypothetical out there, talking among friends here. What if the Belmont stays in June, and what if it can still be run in June? You think people would look more, not just you maybe, but other trainers, look to that 1.5 mile test right off instead of being the third leg as tradition for the Derby?
Honestly, I think it would take away from the Derby. I think if you had a horse that you knew was in the Derby or had enough points to be in the Derby, I think you would probably maybe stay away from it, given 1.5 miles, just a demanding distance over a demanding track. I just don't know if that would be squeezing the lemon too much. And another thing would be, I think it would come down to like if there were any points involved. For I think if there was a race that would receive points for the Kentucky Derby, it'd probably make it a little more enticing for people. And obviously, if you got enough points, you would definitely turn your attention toward the Derby if you didn't have any points. So I think it just kind of depends on how if there's points involved and if you were already in the Derby, it just But honestly, I think if you have a horse that was in the Derby, if you felt comfortable and had enough points, you probably would stay away from it. But it'd ultimately be up to the horse and how much the Belmont meant to you, really.
Yeah, it's going to be so much juggling right now with you and Baffert and Pletcher and Tag and Ben Cohn, and I don't know who else I'm forgetting in there. Anybody's got a contender right now. There's going to be so much juggling in the next few months.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Brad, listen, I really appreciate your time. Congratulations on the success, winning another training title at the fairgrounds, winning Louisiana Derby with Wells Bayou, and glad to hear Mr. Monomoy will be back in training hopefully in about the next month.
Yeah, thanks, Kenny, and thanks for having me on, and look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay, you stay safe. We'll catch up again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brad Cox with us here on the Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. We'll be wrapping things up right after this. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. We thank you for your time this week. We hope everybody is safe in your family and you stay safe over these next few weeks. And we all hope that everybody gets back to business, literally and figuratively, in this time period. One thing is horse racing business goes on. It does not stop. Horses have to be taken care of daily. If you ever invest in a horse, you know that. Regardless, win or lose, they got to be fed. They got to be taken care of. Vets got to check them out. All that takes place in there. And with so many uncertainties out there, it is good to have the hope of the Derby and the Preakness and try to figure out where the Belmont is. And Brad Cox had some really interesting insight. And I think a lot of trainers probably wouldn't be fired up if the Belmont is the first leg this time around of the Triple Crown. What do you think, Thomas Kenny?
I mean, there are a lot of horses each year that, not necessarily endurance horses per se, but, longer distance horses that run exclusively in the Belmont.
Yeah, there's horses that skip all the races to run in the Belmont or miss after the Derby, skip a race. Yeah, so it's generally not the race people point to unless they've got a horse they think can win the Triple Crown, obviously.
Right.
So that'll be interesting, and that's a great thing. At least there's conversation. The only other sport I can think about that people are talking about right now is the NFL, because with the draft coming up, with Tom Brady just signing with Tampa Bay, some things are going on there. Everything else, NBA shut down, NHL shut down, speculation of when the baseball season will start. There's not a lot going on except replays of dodgeball I saw the other night.
Even in the the virtual world of esports, a lot of events have been canceled as far as, fighting games and, actually where people have to physically go somewhere and compete in person. Those are canceled just like any other regular sport. So thankfully we have the option of online, events, but it's not the same.
Well, you're safe here with us each week in this germ-free environment. Scott Hall in the bunker, along with Ben Chaffins and Thomas Kenny, each week here on the Horse Racing Show. This was episode 60. Thank you to Marc Guilfoil, Executive Director of the Kentucky Horse Racing Commission. with some really great insight and some things coming up, and maybe there'll be some racing dates readjusted. Maybe, as trainer Brad Cox told us, they'll be looking at adding a race or two that would become like a Derby prep race that normally doesn't exist right now. Things to think about, things we'll continue to talk about each week here, thanks to your participation on this, the Horse Racing Show. I'm Kenny Rice. Thanks for tuning in. We'll talk again next week.
Wow.